Why would we incarcerate communities? Why would we overwhelm state budgets? Why would we destabilize families? Why would we do this to those who aren't the primary users and sellers of narcotics? Why? Why would state after state develop ruse after ruse to keep American citizens from being able to vote and to have a say in their own democracy? Why? When we say we value democracy, when we say this is why we fight, then why would we have such mass voter suppression? And understand that none of this was done with a mere Klan cross, right? There weren't any cross burnings that just made all of this happen. All of this was done coolly, methodically, systematically. And so in my new book, White Rage, I trace this historical pattern with signpost, Reconstruction, the Great Migration, the Brown decision, the Civil Rights Movement, and the election of Barack Obama. And I also trace it through three key sectors: education, the criminal justice system, and the right to vote. And so now I want to read some excerpts. So as you know, in 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that separate but equal was unconstitutional, overturned the Plessy decision, and said that we must integrate. Jim Crow was no longer the law of the land. The South rose up and said, with massive resistance, and said, and used a series of ruses that, in fact, dragged this process out for a long, long time. Well, in 1973, the court battles are still going on. In 1973, there was an area in San Antonio called the Edgewood District. And in the Edgewood neighborhood, it was 96% Mexican American and African American. It was the poorest neighborhood in San Antonio, with the lowest median income and the lowest property values. They taxed themselves at the highest rate in order to try to fund their children's education. By taxing themselves at the highest rate, they garnered $21 per capita. Meanwhile, Alamo Heights, which was a predominantly white neighborhood in San Antonio, taxed themselves at a much lower rate. They garnered over $300 per student. Lower rate, 1,500% more in funding. Now, what we know is that property values have a lot to do with public policy. Where governments choose, say, to put the landfill, where they choose to put the highway, where they choose to zone certain types of businesses and not others, has a lot to do with property value. So the parents in the Edgewood district took Texas to court and said, this violates our children's 14th Amendment rights to have equal protection under the law. It violates Brown. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled in a 5-4 decision. 4 of the justices were appointed by Richard Nixon, and 1 was appointed by Eisenhower, Dwight Eisenhower. That, quote, there is no fundamental right to education in the Constitution. They said that the state's funding scheme did not systematically discriminate against all poor people in Texas, and that because districts across the United States used property taxes, that this method was not so irrational as to be invidiously discriminatory.